what do we mean by cloud? The way we see it, our perspective, is we typically talk about three types of cloud. You'll probably have seen some of this before, but personal cloud maybe you won't be thinking so much about traditionally. That's becoming more important as we move forwards. Services like SkyDrive and their integration into Windows 8 are going to make that more of a reality. People are already using things like iCloud today. Private cloud is really the evolution of the traditional data center model into something which is more flexible, more agile, and gives you a lower cost per user. And public cloud, things like everything from Hotmail to Facebook to all those services online, but also ways to host infrastructure and build new applications with new development models, things like Azure. So, in fact, the interesting thing is that the boundaries between these are to some extent blurred from a technology delivery perspective, and the better management tools you get today, things like System Center 2012 coming out later this year, which my colleague Nikki will talk about after me, really enable you to transition between those different types of cloud more easily. So, for example, if you want to start off with a private cloud model for your whole workload in your estate and move to a public cloud model later, the new management tools make it easier to do that. So one of the key things driving adoption of the cloud, and which organisations are having to respond to, is consumerisation. You probably hear a lot about that already. A year or so ago, you might have noticed a BBC news article around bring your own computer, and that was where people were starting to want more choice of device and more choice of maybe using their own laptop, which fitted their needs better than the ones offered by their organisation. Nowadays, obviously, all the talk is about bring your own device, and increasingly we're seeing a proliferation of smartphones, people's own tablets, and they want the flexibility to work with the devices that suit them and also use their own applications and services that they use at home throughout the day. One thing that doesn't get talked about so much is the fact that it's not only a range of devices, it's a range of types of network connectivity and the bandwidth and latency that comes with those. And in fact, you need a solution when you're trying to deliver your corporate and enterprise IT to end users in the new world that actually will cope with a wide range of connectivity. That goes for security model as well as the sort of network capacity issues. And that's an important consideration in implementing the next wave of technology to enable these scenarios. So it's not just about the technology, it's also about the way people work. The session this afternoon that Matt's going to talk through touches very much on that and on the way people can be more productive. This is an interesting one because on the one hand we have consumerisation, which is about employees demanding more from IT, employees wanting to go and work at places which give them what they need from a device and a productivity perspective. But at the same time, we can actually, as an organisation, get more out of our employees by enabling them in this way. So there's these sort of two competing pressures. Organisations that do this well will not only attract employees and you'll get higher business and employee satisfaction, but you'll actually also be more productive as an organisation. And that means organisations that do this will tend to outcompete other ones by getting more from their employees. We've also got bring your own applications, it's another consideration. How are we going to enable employees to work with the range of applications they expect at home, the ones that give them the ability to access their social network, bring more value to themselves and the organisation. That's obviously a completely new management challenge. You suddenly got to manage a much wider range of types of applications. And lastly, people are going to want to actually bring the ability to choose the cloud services themselves as well. So you need new ways to actually manage provisioning of third-party software as a service in the future. Put all this together, and it really means a completely new way of delivering IT. It gives completely new benefits, and for the first time, it means people can work how and when they want to. And that's quite a major change that's happening very fast. It's only a few years ago people expected to come into work 9 to 5, and go home, and then their work and home lives were pretty much separate. Whereas nowadays it's all about the freedom to work how you want and when you want. From a corporate IT point of view, what's changing is that we're moving from a device-centric to a people-centric world. So whereas before the desktop was a device, we're talking about physical PCs on people's desktops, and you had a fairly constrained and very tightly defined way of rolling out and allowing access to things. Nowadays, what you're seeing is that the desktop is a service that you're offering that needs to be available through multiple channels, potentially 24/7, and is delivered through devices that you don't control. A couple of key things are that whereas before you control the network connectivity, now you can't. You've got dynamic access, so people are going to be accessing your corporate networks in a wider range of ways. And the big shift, I guess, from a business point of view is that suddenly they don't have to worry about CapEx for devices and rollouts every 3 years. What you've got instead is a usage-based cost based on the amount of resources the person's using, based on the types of software they're using, and one that's probably in BAU as opposed to capital expenditure budgets when you're needing to purchase things. So that's a very big shift in terms of how people interact with IT. And the key thing, I think, for a lot of us working in enterprise environments, because I actually double as an enterprise architect for one of our customers, is that if we don't enable this, we're actually going to see the business going and doing this stuff anyway. You'll see people going out and buying Office 365 and, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this here, Salesforce and all those kinds of things. You know, there's a lot of cloud-based services out there. And if we don't offer the same flexibility with our in-house IT and applications that they can get elsewhere, we'll start to see our role as a trusted partner to the business being eroded. So some of the key considerations that we typically look at when we're going about helping to roll out private clouds to organisations and helping them consider that shift in how they deliver IT are these ones. And don't worry too much about the linkage between these. It was the way that the smart art was used to build the slide. But all of these are key considerations when you're going about deploying cloud technologies. User experience is one that maybe doesn't immediately jump out at people, but actually you'll get the best out of this kind of shift if you involve the users up front, if you have user forums for engaging with how you're going to roll this out, and you actually consider their needs in terms of what they want from IT, rather than seeing it as a set of IT and applications that you're going to give them. By doing that, you'll actually get earlier buy-in to the shift that you're making and a much greater degree of support from the business in doing that. Other ones include real-time communications as part of this. If you're shifting your workloads to the server, you're going to see your network traffic move around a lot. You'll need to do a lot of modeling around that to make sure that you're making the right changes to your network architecture. From a security point of view, you should actually expect to see a better degree of security come out of this, but you will need a different security model and different tools to manage that new world. Obviously, mobile device management becomes even more important. And overall, in order to actually get the agility from your estate with the new technologies, the key thing is to not just put in a bunch of virtualization, but to actually make sure that you know how to manage that as well. If you can't manage it efficiently, then you're not going to be able to deliver this. So this is the reference architecture that we use, and we actually can use this whether we're deploying a more traditional type of architecture with only some parts of this, or whether the whole architecture is virtualized and we're using all the different forms of desktop delivery. What this gives is a secure and scalable core server infrastructure platform, which allows the different types of enterprise IT services to be delivered out through a range of channels, and the whole thing managed securely and in an automated and efficient way. And this really builds on top of two core virtualization stacks, the Microsoft stack and the Citrix stack. They work very well together, and Microsoft and Citrix have been collaborating for a while to make that happen. Some of the key layers in there, with application delivery, really the two main things you're looking at are a technology called AppV, which is Microsoft's application virtualization technology, and that lets you stream applications from a server repository onto your desktops when they're needed by the users. It enables users to self-provision them, and it also isolates applications from each other, enabling things like having different versions of Office running on the same desktop at the same time, which is an amazing solution to those of you with X thousand access databases and old versions that's stopping you upgrade. We've certainly got that problem at places where I work. So the other one is Citrix XenApp, which is a model for application delivery that makes that easier and allows you to publish applications when needed. In terms of desktop delivery, there's really sort of three main models. You've obviously got a traditional thick client model, which will always be needed for some scenarios, some applications, maybe scenarios where you've got some legacy app that needs a dongle and there's no way to get away from that. But for most scenarios, we see people going for either what we term hosted shared desktops or for what we call full VDI, full virtual desktop. So the difference between those two things is that with a hosted shared desktop, essentially you've got lots of users logging in to the same operating system environment, the same desktop, similar idea to terminal services, but taken on a couple of generations. And that obviously gives you a very high user density for your hardware, so it's very cost effective. And that will work for users with relatively simple applications, web applications, terminal applications to mainframes, say, those kinds of scenarios. VDI is really giving you a complete individual desktop experience for each user. So the cost per user is higher, but it gives you a much greater degree of isolation and caters for other scenarios where maybe you need more security, maybe your apps are more complex, those sorts of things. So again, we use the combination of Microsoft and Citrix technologies there. So typically we'd see Zen Desktop being used alongside Zen App, that type of technology. Underpinning all of this, we'll be using the same kind of server virtualization that most of you will probably have rolled out today. We normally recommend Hyper-V, both from a management and cost perspective. It's a market leader. So alongside all of that, you need a way to manage that and keep it secure, and this is where System Center really comes in. System Center today is already good for this, but later in this year, System Center 2012 is coming out. Nikki will talk about that, and it adds a whole bunch of new capabilities to make this easier. One thing that's really important about that reference architecture is that it delivers a consistent user experience regardless of the device you're using to access it. And that's very much about the Citrix receiver technology, which gives you a consistent set of capability on a range of devices to interact with your server-based estate. So today it works across all the main platforms. You can use it on your iPhone if you want. You don't get a great desktop experience on an iPhone, but it is doable. But it's a really good experience across most tablets and other types of larger form factor devices. Alongside that consistent user experience, you need consistent device management. System Center has some capabilities there in the 2012 release that are really good. And also we often use an app solution called Mobile Iron, which is available today and offers probably the widest range of device support and device management out there right now. What we're seeing here is, this is a standard iPad, not very much running on it. Normal applications to prove it's an iPad, like Calendar and so forth. And then I'm going to launch the Citrix receiver application. And what I'm now doing is accessing a desktop that's running in our data center, running Windows 7, using that reference architecture I was just describing. And what I'm getting now is a full Windows 7 experience on my iPad, and I can interact with it as if I'm using it locally. So I guess to start with, just sort of prove it is really Windows. It's not just a Flash movie running on here. I can launch OneNote and bring up the keyboard and start typing something new. Get the idea. And what this supports with the Citrix receiver client on the iPad, and this is fairly consistent with other devices, depends on the device, is it supports a range of gestures. For example, I can double finger tap, and that's alt-tabbing between the different applications. You can use 3 fingers and bring the keyboard up. So what you're seeing is a fairly high degree of usability with a device that you maybe would think wasn't that suitable for using Windows. It's got a number of other features, including being able to use a mouse pointer instead if you're finding it hard to find the right spot with your finger. And in fact, you can also use an alternative device like your iPhone as a trackpad and pair it with this, so you've effectively got a mouse as well. And obviously, you can get Bluetooth keyboards and so forth. So it's actually a very, very usable solution. So that's the core sort of VDI experience. As well as that, what we've actually got running on this desktop, I'll just turn off the mouse, is multiple. We're using application virtualization to deliver multiple versions of Office at the same time. So installed natively on this VDI image is Office 2010, and I can run Excel 2010, and that should look pretty familiar to most of you. I'm not going to demo Excel. But I've also got in here Excel 2003 and 2007. If you look carefully, you'll notice a little pop-up in the bottom right, because that application was actually being streamed off the server. Now, there was some caching already in this image, so that was pretty quick, but it's not a lot slower than that, even if you've never done it before. What's actually happening there is the AppV technology essentially sandboxes that application. So it puts a layer between the operating system and the application for accessing things like the registry, the file system, those types of assets. And that means that you can completely isolate that application. And that's why we can actually have Office 2003 applications running in parallel alongside Office 2010 and at the same time. And this is a very smooth experience, so I'll give you a quick example. I've copied a couple of random emails into a demo folder here in Outlook, and one of them's got an XLS file, so 2003 format, and one of them's got a 2010 format. And if I actually launch that from Outlook 2010, this is the XLS one, that actually opens in 2003. If I go and launch an XLSX file, which is 2007 onwards format, then that's actually going to, oh, that does, there we are. That's interesting, actually. I did actually just try and open in Office 2003. I've not seen that before, but I think that must have been, we'll have to look at that, actually, because that shouldn't happen. But that has actually now, really bad demo problems today, but it has actually now launched in Office 2010. So it's a pretty seamless experience. This is a demo rig, and it's possible we haven't got something configured right, but essentially what AppV enables you to do is link things like MIME types and file extensions to virtual applications or physical ones. So you can configure the relationship in much the same way that Windows does the relationship between file types and applications normally. So that combination is pretty powerful. I mean, the things we've just seen mean that you can have thin clients in your desktops or mobile devices, so you don't actually need a traditional PC deployed anymore. You may still want to for many scenarios, but for a range of users, you don't have to. We've got centralized management, and we've also got application virtualization. The big thing there for me is it removes the end-user computing problem where you've got loads of Access databases that are impossible to upgrade without major expense, so you can't do a Windows 7 rollout or an Office 2007 rollout. Well, that problem's gone if you use this technology, and once you've deployed it, essentially then you don't need to do much work with packaging your applications. Many major applications will already be packaged for AppV, and there's tools there to help you do that packaging and the compatibility checking that make it really easy. So this isn't some incredibly complex, cutting-edge technology. It's been there for a while, and it's very easy to use now. So those are the main things I was going to demo. I could try and demo switching back to the laptop, but I think you've got the idea. Basically, because this is running in the server, I can have that same desktop and access it through different devices and just take it off one and straight onto another. Obviously, you need an internet connection to do this. So provided you've got connectivity out to the internet, and obviously as part of your reference architecture, your enterprise IT is set up to allow secure access from the internet, or potentially you can use some kind of VPN technology like Microsoft Direct Access is the one we typically recommend, then you can make this work. The one scenario there which isn't catered for very well is offline. So what do you do with offline? Well, you can have a traditional model with traditional desktops, but also Citrix Zen Desktop also allows you to take that virtual machine offline and synchronize it back when you go back online. So if you take that approach, it means actually you can have a single model, including offline support and thick client device support as well. So that, to me, that's light years ahead of where most enterprise IT is today, but surprisingly, those technologies have all been around for a year or so. And what we haven't really figured out is how to make best use of them, but we're trying to do that now. So this technology stack with Hyper-V at the back end for the server infrastructure and Zen Desktop, Zen App, those kinds of technologies at the front end, we've actually got that deployed for ourselves internally today. We're deploying private cloud solutions around that for customers, and parts of this we're also rolling out as public cloud solutions, and some of you we've already talked to about that. So that same technology stack allows you to deliver that whole range of scenarios. So I'm hoping that's quite exciting, getting you all thinking, because it is such a leap in terms of what you can then offer to the business. They can use their own devices. You can offer per user costing, because it's very easy to put metrics together around storage and server capacity and all these sorts of things for the virtual desktops running on that infrastructure. And suddenly that means you can roll people out more quickly, you can provision apps more quickly, you can allow self-service provisioning of apps. And the management framework is there to allow you to keep on top of that today. And Nikki's going to talk a bit more about that with System Center. The last thing I was going to mention really was about our partnerships and the way we deliver this, some of the technology stack. These are all technologies you'll be familiar with. I mentioned Microsoft and Citrix, and they're sort of key components at the software level and enabling that to work. They've come together in something called vAlliance, which is Microsoft and Citrix and a small selection of other partners. We're actually part of that as well. And that's about trying to make the best use of these technologies and deploy them in a best practice way to get the kind of benefits you've seen today. Underneath that, we use a fairly standardized hardware platform. Obviously, some of our customers have their own relationships with vendors and their own technology preferences. But the way we've been rolling it out is with HP, Cisco, NetApp, and Wise technology, Wise for the thin clients. Alongside that, there's a number of tool sets we use when we go about delivering a project or a program to roll these out to an organization that help you with things like application assessment, assessment of your existing estate in terms of Word documents and the content in them and how you're going to migrate them over to what is a fairly new architecture that you'll probably want a different layout for. And also technologies to help with the packaging of applications for the new world. So, we have a very consistent model we can come and talk to you about with all of this. It is well established, and there's good partnerships out there to make this work. So, feel free to come and ask me about those. Obviously, there's a range of other vendors out there as well. They can plug into that same reference architecture, and the challenges are much the same, and benefits are much the same.